When American pilots first encountered Japan's Nakajima Ki-84 Hayate, they were caught off guard. After years of facing outdated Japanese aircraft like the Zero, suddenly a new machine appeared, fast, heavily armed, and dangerously competitive with America's best. Known to US intelligence as Frank, the Hayate was unlike anything they expected so late in the war. To American airmen, it was a reminder that Japan still had fight left in the skies. First encounters. America meets the Hayate in the skies. The first time American pilots saw the Ki-84 Hayate in action, it came as a genuine shock. For much of the war, US airmen had grown accustomed to outclassing Japanese aircraft. The once feared Zero had lost its edge, while interceptors like the Ki-43 and Ki-44 were increasingly outmatched by P-38 Lightnings, P-47 Thunderbolts, and the legendary P-51 Mustangs. By 1944, American flyers assumed the Japanese arsenal was in decline. Then came the Hayate. The first encounters over China and the Philippines challenged that belief. Reports from pilots returning from missions described a fighter with startling speed and an ability to climb at rates far beyond what they expected from Japanese designs. In combat, the Ki-84 demonstrated agility without sacrificing toughness, something that caught US aviators off balance. Pilots who had learned to exploit the fragility of Japanese fighters using boom and zoom tactics to stay out of turning battles were now confronted with an aircraft that could match their vertical maneuvers and withstand more punishment. American intelligence officers were equally startled. The Hayate looked more like a Western fighter than the light, fabric-covered machines they were used to dissecting. Heavier armor, self-sealing fuel tanks, and 4 formidable 20mm cannons in later models suggested Japan had finally produced an aircraft capable of meeting US fighters head-on. Though initially dismissed as an anomaly, repeated encounters confirmed this was no fluke. The Hayate was fast, powerful, and deadly. For American airmen, it signaled that the air war over Asia was far from finished. Technical evaluations. Performance beyond expectations. When the first captured Ki-84s were tested by American engineers after the war, their impressions validated what frontline pilots had already sensed in combat. The Hayate was a leap forward in Japanese aircraft design. Powered by the Nakajima Ha-45 radial engine, it could achieve speeds of over 390 miles per hour, putting it on par with the P-51 Mustang and faster than most Japanese fighters that came before it. Its climb rate rivaled that of the P-47 Thunderbolt, while its maneuverability remained competitive with lighter designs. The armament also drew attention. Early versions carried a combination of 12.7mm machine guns and 20mm cannons, while later variants packed twin 30mm cannons capable of shredding even the heaviest Allied bombers. For years, American pilots had relied on the vulnerability of Japanese aircraft, but the Ki-84's armor protection and self-sealing tanks dramatically reduced those advantages. Suddenly, dogfights with Japanese opponents could no longer be assumed to end in easy victories. Test pilots at Wright Field after the war described the Ki-84 as the best Japanese fighter of World War II. It could outclimb nearly everything in the American inventory except perhaps the newest late-war Mustangs. Its speed was formidable, and when equipped with high-octane fuel, something Japan itself often lacked, it could push even further. Engineers noted its rugged construction and potential for further improvement, had resources been available. For America, the technical evaluation of the Ki-84 reinforced what pilots had experienced in the field. This was no obsolete relic. It was a true high-performance fighter, one that might have changed the balance of power in the skies had it arrived earlier or in greater numbers. The Hayate earned respect not as a curiosity, but as a genuine rival. Battlefield reality. Facing the Hayate in combat. For American pilots in the Pacific Theater, meeting the Ki-84 in combat was a sobering experience. Accounts from Mustang and Thunderbolt squadrons flying over the Philippines, Formosa, and Okinawa reveal a mix of respect and frustration. Unlike earlier Japanese fighters, the Hayate could accelerate out of dives and pursue American planes at altitudes where most Japanese engines would falter. Pilots quickly realized this was no zero. The Hayate could hold its own in almost any engagement. One P-47 pilot described the shock of seeing a Ki-84 climb alongside him during what he thought was a safe vertical escape. Others reported that traditional tactics, high-speed diving attacks, were less effective, as the Hayate's rugged airframe could absorb hits and stay in the fight. Its armament made it especially dangerous. A burst from its cannons could cripple a bomber or bring down a fighter in seconds. In squadron debriefings, pilots noted the Hayate demanded full concentration and careful tactical planning. Yet, while American flyers respected its performance, they also noticed cracks in its operational effectiveness. Poor Japanese pilot training by 1944 and 1945 meant many Hayates were flown by inexperienced aviators who could not unlock the aircraft's full potential. Maintenance issues and low-grade fuel further reduced its performance in actual battles. In many cases, what could have been a deadly rival was blunted by Japan's deteriorating war machine. Still, whenever a skilled Japanese pilot took the controls, the Ki-84 proved it could match the best American fighters. Dogfights against ace opponents were remembered with unease, as even seasoned US veterans admitted the Hayate could dominate if flown aggressively. To America, the Ki-84 became both a warning and a reassurance, proof that Japan could build a world-class fighter, but also evidence that by 1944 it was too late to turn the tide. Intelligence reports the Frank's reputation in US eyes. American intelligence quickly took notice of the Ki-84, assigning it the Allied reporting name Frank. Early reports highlighted its striking resemblance in performance to Western fighters, a surprise given Japan's prior reliance on lightweight, fragile designs. Air Technical Intelligence units collected pilot accounts and fragments of wrecked aircraft, piecing together a picture of a machine that was faster, better armed, and more survivable than anything Japan had previously fielded. US analysts warned that the Frank was not to be underestimated. Bulletins circulated to frontline squadrons described the aircraft as a genuine threat to American bombers and fighters alike. Its armament, particularly when equipped with 30mm cannons, was assessed as capable of devastating B-29 formations. For years, American bomber crews had counted on Japanese interceptors struggling to bring down heavily armored planes. Now they faced an adversary with the firepower to deliver crippling blows in a single pass. By late 1944, US commanders knew the Ki-84 was Japan's most advanced operational fighter. Intelligence reports stressed caution, advising pilots not to assume Japanese fighters were obsolete. Instead, they were told to respect the Frank's capabilities and to exploit weaknesses in pilot training and tactical execution. Even as America's overwhelming industrial advantage made victory inevitable, the Hayate still earned an unusual degree of respect in official evaluations. Unlike other late-war Japanese prototypes that barely reached production, the Ki-84 was encountered widely enough for its reputation to solidify. For American intelligence, it was the rare Japanese aircraft considered on par with the best Allied designs. Though often hampered by Japan's logistical collapse, the Frank became a symbol of what Japanese aviation could achieve when resources allowed. Its reputation lingered in American briefings as the final dangerous evolution of Japan's fighter force. Logistics versus performance: America's surprising advantage. Despite its formidable design, American pilots soon realized the Ki-84 was shackled by Japan's collapsing logistics. On paper, the Frank could outpace and outclimb most US fighters. In reality, many were grounded by maintenance issues or hobbled by substandard fuel. By 1944, Japan's oil reserves were dwindling, forcing reliance on poor-quality substitutes that robbed engines of power. U.S. intelligence noted that the Ha-45 engines often failed to deliver their maximum output, leaving the Hayate a shadow of its potential. Maintenance further compounded the problem. American crews marveled at the Hayate's advanced systems, but Japanese ground crews lacked spare parts and proper facilities to keep the planes operational. Reports from captured airfields revealed abandoned Ki-84s with engines seized from lack of lubrication, tires worn to shreds, or cannons rendered useless by lack of ammunition. Even well-trained pilots often flew aircraft operating far below their design limits. This disparity became a psychological advantage for American flyers. They knew the Frank was deadly in theory, but also recognized that only a handful would be at peak performance in any engagement. Pilots learned to distinguish between skilled opponents in well-maintained aircraft, who posed genuine danger, and the majority who struggled with worn-out machines. U.S. bomber crews also adapted quickly. While initial encounters with Ki-84s raised alarms, formations soon realized that large numbers of Franks rarely materialized. Mechanical failures thinned their numbers, and fuel shortages limited sorties. Where America could launch massed raids with hundreds of aircraft, Japan fielded only dozens, many limping into battle. In the end, logistics, not performance, determined the Hayate's impact. America recognized that Japan had produced a fighter to rival the Mustang or Thunderbolt, but without fuel, spare parts, and trained crews, it could never fulfill that promise. For U.S. forces, this gap between design brilliance and operational weakness proved the ultimate reassurance. Psychological impact, respect, and fear in equal measure. Among American airmen, the Ki-84 inspired a mix of admiration and unease. Pilots respected its speed and power, acknowledging that it was the only Japanese aircraft capable of meeting a Mustang or Thunderbolt on equal terms. Debriefings often noted the shock of encountering a Frank that could dive, climb, and turn without the glaring vulnerabilities of earlier Japanese machines. Veterans who had grown accustomed to dominance suddenly found themselves in real dogfights again. There was also fear. Bomber crews, particularly those flying B-29s from China and the Marianas, dreaded the Hayate's cannon fire. Unlike the nimble Zeros that posed more nuisance than threat, the Frank could tear into formations and bring down heavily armored bombers with frightening efficiency. Accounts describe the anxiety of seeing a Ki-84 approach, its silhouette signaling a level of danger not associated with Japanese fighters since 1942. Yet there was also relief woven into that fear. American pilots recognized that the Hayate's greatest weakness was not in the air but on the ground. Few were flown by seasoned aces. Many were in the hands of inexperienced recruits barely trained to handle the machine. Poor maintenance meant frequent malfunctions, and in many cases, the Frank never delivered its full bite. Still, the fact that it could was enough to leave a lasting impression. The respect it earned is evident in post-war memoirs. U.S. aces admitted that if the Ki-84 had been introduced earlier, in greater numbers and with proper support, it could have posed a serious challenge. In combat, it became a reminder that the Japanese aviation industry, even in its final hours, could still produce aircraft worthy of fear. That duality, respect for its design, tempered by recognition of Japan's decline, defined America's psychological view of the Hayate. Legacy: the Hayate's place in U.S. post-war analysis. After the war, captured Ki-84s were flown and tested extensively by American engineers. Their verdict was unanimous. The Hayate was Japan's best fighter of World War II. At Wright Field, test pilots praised its acceleration, climb rate, and overall balance, noting that with proper fuel and maintenance, it could have rivaled the P-51 Mustang directly. In fact, some evaluations concluded it might have been superior in certain performance categories, particularly climb. These post-war tests solidified the Hayate's legacy in American eyes. Unlike many Japanese designs dismissed as underpowered or outdated, the Ki-84 was recognized as a world-class fighter. Engineers marveled at how far Japan had come from the fragile Zero of 1940, producing an aircraft that embodied the lessons of 4 years of combat. Its ruggedness, firepower, and versatility were all qualities American pilots valued in their own machines. Still, US analysts also emphasized the context. Japan's war economy had collapsed. The Hayate's brilliance was undermined by systemic shortages, poor pilot training, and failing logistics. In American studies, the Ki-84 became an example of wasted potential, a machine capable of turning the tide in theory, but introduced too late and in too few numbers to matter strategically. For American airmen, the legacy of the Hayate was personal as well as technical. It was remembered as the rare Japanese fighter that demanded caution and respect, even at the height of US aerial superiority. Its presence in combat served as a reminder that underestimating the enemy could be fatal. Ultimately, the Ki-84 Hayate's place in US memory was that of a worthy adversary. It was not the savior Japan needed, but it proved that even in its final days, Japanese aviation could produce a fighter that made America pause, take notice, and acknowledge its opponent's skill. In the end, the Nakajima Ki-84 Hayate stood as both a triumph and a tragedy. To America, it was proof that Japan could still design fighters to rival the Mustang and Thunderbolt, machines worthy of respect and even fear. Yet it also symbolized Japan's decline, an aircraft crippled by shortages, poor fuel, and untrained pilots. For US airmen, the Hayate was never dismissed as another fragile Zero. It was remembered as the Frank, a fighter that demanded caution, earned admiration, and reminded America that victory was not won by design alone, but by industry, logistics, and training. In the skies of 1944 and 1945, it was too little, too late. But in post-war memory, the Hayate remains the Japanese fighter America could never ignore, a final flash of brilliance from a nation already on the path to defeat.